Good afternoon, everyone, and a very warm welcome to the second in a 6-part e-commerce webinar series. I'm Elisheva Gilbert, and I'm the Chief Marketing Officer and Head of Small Business at SASFIN. We are passionate about enabling the growth of business in South Africa. So when we were approached to sponsor the series, it was a no-brainer for us. I mean, who wouldn't want to be part of a series where business owners get the opportunity to learn from industry leaders on how to build a world-class online presence? It's no secret that COVID caught many companies off guard. The accelerated move to digital ways of working has meant that many business owners have struggled to launch an e-commerce offering and digital presence. At SASFIN, we've been building an online presence over a period of time with our Beyond Business Banking platform. So when lockdown happened, we were fortunately poised to serve the markets in a meaningful way as a digital-first bank where you never have to step into a branch. As a business, you can bank with us, you can invest with us, you can take your money offshore, you can get a business loan. In fact, during this time, when most banks were tightening their credit policy, we were looking for ways to enable the growth of business in South Africa, and we successfully rolled out our credit offering. But you haven't come here to hear about me and what we have to offer. Let's move on to the stars of the session. And today I have the privilege of introducing the panel moderator, award-winning Richard Frank, who is the head of digital at Flow Communication. Richard has extensive experience in managing large development teams and complex web projects. So I know that I'm leaving you in good hands today and with the best person to moderate the conversation. Over to you, Richard.
Thanks, Elisheva. That was a great intro. It's a pleasure to be with everyone today. And it's going to be great to be chairing the second part in the Online X e-commerce bootcamp series, supported by, of course, SASFIN, PayFast, and U-Africa. My name is Richard Frank. I am the head of digital at Flow Communications. And for those who attended last week, we looked at the planning phase of taking your business online. And this week, we're going to be looking at the build phase. A phase which is very close to my heart. As a builder myself, as a web developer, a programmer who's been building websites and e-commerce solutions for the past 15 years. And I've received my fair share of gray hair during the building these critical components of your web presence. But I'm not the only one who's got gray hair. I'm sure some of our panelists have it as well, whether I'd like to admit it or not. I'm joined today by 3 other builders. And the first one I'd like to introduce is Melissa Ralston from Maverick Marketing. I think Melissa is a Shopify expert and should be joining us on the line. Hi, Melissa. Welcome. And what makes you excited about e-commerce?
Hi, thanks so much, Richard. Yes, well, okay, so first of all, I am a Shopify expert, so I'm wearing my colors on my sleeve.
Right.
And I have a little bit of a bias, I will put it out there, but I love e-commerce. I started out and I did many different builds, different types of builds, and along the way I have become a Shopify expert, and that has become my passion. I love e-commerce, I love shopping online, but the truth is I love building e-commerce stores. I love the way they work, and I love the process of finessing how we shop online. It's a little bit of a passion of mine, and yeah, I'm looking forward to the discussion today.
Yeah, it's going to be great. We've also got Billy Ainkamera from Assemble. Billy, he's our resident techie, I would say. Billy, you've also been building bespoke e-commerce sites for a number of years. Could you join us on the line as part of our panel? Billy from Assemble.
Thanks, Richard. Yes, also love e-commerce. Been buying stuff online since we could. And yeah, we are focused on building custom solutions. Right. So we are on the very one side of the scale, so to speak, and we're very passionate about that. It comes with a lot of things that you need to know about beforehand. So I'm hoping that we can unpack some of that, and we can help some people answer some questions.
Cool. And then thirdly, we have Bjorn Byrne from Media Rocket. This name, Bjorn Byrne, it sounds like a rock star. Bjorn, welcome to the panel, and tell us a little bit about yourself and your passion for e-commerce.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Richard. Yeah, my passion for e-commerce I think what I'm passionate about is the user experience behind e-commerce. So I'm fairly agnostic when it comes to systems, what you should be using. My goal is really to serve the user. I myself am a user. I shop online all the time. So it represents a large part of our market and our economy at the moment. So it's so crucial that we're having these conversations to get more businesses online and getting people selling and buying online. And my mission is to serve the user, serve the buyer, achieve the business objectives, and hopefully build more economy online.
Excellent. And of course, we have you, the audience. We'd like you to participate as well by asking questions in the chat. You can find it on Zoom, the chat facility, as well as answering our polls. And in fact, we've got a poll we're going to be asking straight away, which is, do you have an e-commerce website currently? And we want to ask this question. It's just going to guide the panel in terms of how we navigate the conversation. We want to know whether you have an e-commerce website, yes or no. Very simple question to ask, and we're going to give you 10 seconds to answer that. And while you're doing that, I'm just going to take you quickly through the topics that we're going to be discussing. So again, we're talking about the build phase. Last week was the planning phase. We're now building our website. What are the ABCs of getting started with an online presence? How to choose the right technical stack? How to design a site that delivers a world-class customer experience? How to optimize that website to transform it into a top-performing salesperson, a salesperson that does not go to sleep, 24/7 is selling your products or services, and how to ensure a web build is done right the first time. I think that's critical. As a builder, you don't want, and as a client, you don't want to be building your site more than once. It is like having a baby, right? So now the build phase does have a lot of jargon in it. So I'm going to ask our panel to try to be careful with the jargon. We're going to try and explain this in layperson terms, and let's get to it. So where I'd like to start is with Melissa, where I'd like to ask you, can you give us a high-level overview of the build phase? Like what is involved in this phase, and what are the ABCs of it? How do we achieve greatness in the build phase?
Thanks, Richard. Okay, so, well, the way I start a build is normally with the client spec. The interesting thing is the client will phone me and they'll say, I want to build a website, and please won't you send me a quote? And I generally go, okay, because the truth is every single website is different and everyone just wants a quote cold. But the truth is you need to start with your product and build it from there. Think about what your functionality is, think about how complex you want your site to be, think about it quite strategically. So when we start a spec, and that's how I'm going to talk to you about the build process, we start and we say, how many products do you have? Do you have 10 products? Do you have 10,000 products? Do you have, what is the functionality do you need? Do you just need a straight purchase? Do you need more specified kind of process for your purchase? Based on that, what kind of platform will best suit you? I know that Billy's going to talk to us a lot about platform choice. I am a Shopify expert, and if it's not something Shopify can do, I will point you somewhere else, and I will tell you that Shopify can do everything. But then we will start and we'll go from your product. We'll say, is your pricing right? Do you have payment gateways? Do you have your right integrations? Have we integrated your couriers? Have we integrated your notifications? How do your processes work? But basically, we have to go step by step through what you actually require. You can require a really basic build, which is products and purchase, and you're out of there. And you can require quite a high level build, which may include upsells and customizations. And I mean, there are many technicalities that we can go into. What I do advise my clients to do is think logically about where they come from. Some of my clients come and they're a small little client who don't even have a brick and mortar, and some have 270 brick and mortar stores. And based on that, we talk about scaling. How do you scale your business? You start small, and when you have the budget, you start selling stuff. You build your website with that, or you start big. And also sometimes when we say start small, it's so that you can learn your customer and how they traffic before you start adding the bells and the whistles and you don't know if that's what they want. But basically, we start a build with a spec and take it from there.
Excellent. And obviously, one part of that planning phase, or in order to plan your build, is choosing the right technical spec. And I'm actually going to be pulling in Billy to talk about that. We've been chatting about, there's Shopify. It's a great platform that can be used for your shop, your e-commerce shop, but there are others as well. And then there's, of course, building it from scratch, bespoke, which I think, Billy, is your side of the coin. Can you take us a little bit through how do you choose the right technical stack?
Absolutely. That's actually a very good question, Richard. So as Melissa was saying, a lot of people start and they want to start small and they don't really know. And we have quite a few people that come to us and they want to automatically start custom. And often they just want an app. Someone wants an app because an app will solve everything, Yeah. And so our process is to make sure that the person is in fact fit for a custom development, because there are a lot of solutions out there that are a better fit than a custom development in many, many cases. In fact, more often than not, I would say, in your e-commerce space.
So can I just pause you there, Billy? Sorry.
Sure.
So you're saying that in more cases than not, you're actually going to want to go for something that's a bit, templated, a bit boilerplate, rather than going full build from the ground up.
Absolutely, especially if you're starting off. So when you're starting off, you want the most bang for your buck, right? You want to, you often have a limited budget. If you've won a grant or someone's throwing in, hundreds of millions or something,
given you,
100
million rand.
We'll help you spend that money. Absolutely. But most people are not in that situation. And so they need to be the most efficient. And we even when we send people away, we know that eventually when their business grows, they'll probably come back to us or need our guidance at some stage. So we do look at the best fit. And depending on, there's certain times where you want to do custom. And I would say that those times are, if you've assessed what is out there in terms of the out-of-the-box solutions, and you've come to the conclusion that this just won't cut it. You must remember that it's much easier and actually cheaper to change how your process is to fit with an out-of-the-box solution than to put money into it and to build the custom way that we are doing our operations now. Now, it sounds like I'm pushing everything away.
That sounds counterintuitive. You're telling me that we must change our business processes to fit the technical solution?
It does depend on your budget, and it depends on your appetite for what you want in your solution. But absolutely, it's easier to get people to do steps that they're not familiar with, and to work with something that's out of the box, and you save yourself sometimes hundreds of thousands of rands, and that money can be put elsewhere. We're a business that builds custom websites and custom apps and custom solutions, but we're also a small business that knows, or that at least also grapples with the difficulties of a small business. So we ourselves don't want to spend money where we don't have to. So we try and help from a business perspective and go, what is the best for the business, and help people with that journey. And at times, yes, you get to the point where you want to, or you need to do a custom development. But definitely in starting, until you get your critical mass, it's probably not what we would recommend.
Great, thanks, Billy. And I'll come back to Melissa now, because we're bouncing between you. You've now sent your customer to Billy. Billy has sent them back to you. Let's go back to you. Shopify as a platform, when is it not a good idea to use Shopify? Is there any cases where you've said, wow, okay, that is not, and I'm going to say Shopify in your case, but I'll put into that all the other platforms that are out there that allow people to quickly build a really actually great looking website really quickly. But Melissa, yeah.
Absolutely. So basically, I believe that not. So lots of people come to me and they say, we want X, Y, and Z. We want a custom build. And I say, okay, great. We want it to look like Woolworths. I say, fantastic. Do you have Woolworths budget? Do you have a couple £1,000,000 lying around? You want to throw my direction? You know, fantastic. We can do that with pleasure. But the issue is that when it comes down to the basic functionality of it, Shopify has, and WooCommerce and Magento and, you know, BigCommerce, they have invested so many millions of dollars into finessing the process in such a way that it works. So their backends are robust. I mean, Shopify just reworked the entire user experience of checkout. They put in millions of dollars to work out if the checkout process works seamlessly. Now, that kind of investment into knowing if a process works so well, you are working on tried and tested, versus going and doing a custom where you're a little guy, you don't have millions to spend, you don't have hundreds of thousands to spend, you have a couple of thousand or tens of thousands to spend. That's what you've got, that's your budget, you know. Use the tried and tested in that way. You've got a back end which is robust, you've got a system that is robust. With Shopify, you've got a system that's not hackable. You look at something like Kylie Cosmetics, where she sells out in the first couple of seconds, honestly, that she launches a new product. The kind of traffic that she hits is like, they can't even quantify it, and Shopify servers can handle it. You know, the size is there, the specs are there, you know, you're working on something that is robust. Right. But okay, you go to a system now, like something that's highly spec'd, like an Airbnb, or something where you have, or let's say something where you have functionalities where you need a booking system, or something which is much more customizable. I won't say a Woolies or a, but there you're looking exactly the same thing, or something where you have. So I had someone come to me this weekend, and he was a speaker, and he said, build me a Shopify website. I said, for a speaker, we're not the right platform for you. Right, you Melissa, know? And thanks. That would go to Billy.
Excellent. Yeah, exactly. There are some audience members who are saying, what about Bjorn? Sorry, Bjorn, we haven't forgotten you. We've now chosen our technical stack, and we're now moving on to building the user experience, a really key part of conversions. We know that Amazon say that for every 100 milliseconds, you know, that the user waits, or that the user can't get a click or can't get through, they're losing customers. User experience is key for customer conversion. What is your process? What is the build process in user experience? How do we go through that process from a user experience point of view?
Cool. So I think it's quite important to remember that there's two types of users. Essentially, I mean, there's many types of users. But essentially, there's the business owner that has to use the system. So oftentimes, that's why, to Billy and Melissa's point, it's quite nice to use a system that's out of the box, easy to use from a back-end perspective, from a back office perspective, to actually manage my business. So that's the first user you've got to consider, is yourself. As a business owner, what is going to be the best thing to supplement my business? And then we've got to look at how can we tailor this experience to my target audience. So it's always very important to start with the U in UX, and that is the user. Let's understand, who is my customer? Who am I trying to attract to my store? And who do I want to sell to? Then the one principle that people often forget is that user experience doesn't actually start on the website itself. So user experience starts, oftentimes 99% of the time, it starts on a social media platform like Facebook or Instagram through an advert, or Google through search. That's really where the user experience starts. So that starts to talk about your content. Is your content enticing? Does it actually speak to the user that you're trying to fish for? So that is typically where we would start. We would start in the business case itself and assess, first off, for the business, what is going to be the best platform, which Billy and Melissa have touched on a bit. And having said that, there's also a middle ground, you know, for middleware, so to speak, to automate some of your back-end process. If you were to go for a slightly more custom route, you know, there are certain automations. I say there's a middle road between completely out of the box boilerplate type platforms and custom development. There's a middle road there as well, where you can still integrate into a Shopify, you can still integrate into a custom build, into things like your accounting systems, so that certain business functions are automated. So there is also that assessment that has to take place from a business perspective, from a business case perspective. So those are quite a few important aspects that we can highlight. I've got a few other points to go through here, but I don't want to give it all away immediately. So
well,
always assess the user first and use the best technology to fit.
Well, let me ask you a follow-up question, because in the build phase, our small business owners, entrepreneurs are going to be thrown a whole bunch of jargon. UX itself is a word that means a lot of things, user experience. And I think you've explained it very carefully, that it's about a journey that the user is taking. It's not just the icon on the page that is UX. It's an experience that the user is following. But there's stages in the UX process, and people start talking about things like sitemaps, wireframes. What are these things? Mock-ups. Can you break down?
Yeah, absolutely. So let's start off with step one, concept. Let's look at, how do you go about producing concept for a user experience or for a website or e-commerce store in this case. I'd say the first important step is to figure out precedents. Find some precedent, find a few examples of things that are tried and tested and that work, and then use that as inspiration to go into what we call wireframing. So what wireframing is a simple grayscale type design, and it's like if you were to think of Lego and Duplo. Duplo are the big blocks for toddlers, and Lego, us adults are building Death Stars, and in our garage is kind of a thing out of Lego. So wireframing is like the Duplo blocks. That kind of like sees largely what components fit together, where should they live across the site, and then sitemap, that really starts to define the path that the user takes through to a converting site part of the website. So typically a user would land on your homepage. If they haven't landed directly on a product page from an advert, but if they land on the homepage, we need to define that user journey through a sitemap. So we say, okay, cool. From the homepage, they've got maybe 3 routes to take off of this homepage to learn a bit more about a product, to learn a bit more about the business, or to get in touch with the organization. So those would be 3 paths off of the homepage. If you were to land on a product page, for argument's sake, you've got to figure out through your user journey and your sitemap how they're going to get from product to adding it into the cart to a checkout process, and upsells and cross-sells. So you've got to map out, okay, I've added product A to my cart. What are the potential cross-sells? What are the potential upsells for that product that I can suggest along that path to add more to the cart and ultimately get them to a checkout point effectively and quickly. So I don't know if that answers the question, Richard.
I think it does. And I mean, what's quite exciting about user experience is all of us can participate in it. We can use websites. I mean, we just had the Woolworths example. It's a great UX website user experience. There's also Amazon, takealot.com. I mean, in terms of how customers can first, interact and get used to the user experience of e-commerce, they can use tools, websites and apps in order to get an appreciation for it without necessarily having to employ a UX expert from day one.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, and like Melissa mentioned about, Shopify having overhauled the UI for the checkout process, there are organizations that have invested millions in tried and tested ways of actually, doing UX. So there is precedent. And we're all users at the end of the day. So we're all sitting in front of a screen right now using Zoom to interact. We're all users. We all have some level of precedent that we can glean from. I'd say you want to engage a UX expert when you start getting into some really deep e-commerce platforms or apps, bespoke custom apps, banking apps, and so forth, that's when you start to engage UX experts, but for the most part, the precedent is out there. Look at what you use,
what you enjoy using. Yeah.
100%.
And use that as inspiration for your own site. You'll probably mostly be using a Shopify site or a WooCommerce site.
Yeah.
It's probably a lot of the market, but there are some bespoke builds out there that are great, like Take a Lot and Woolworths, etc. We did get some poll results. 47% of you said yes, you do have an e-commerce site, and 53% said no. So we've got quite an even split between people who've already been down this path and people who are wanting to take this path for the first time. So we're going to go back to Melissa now and really talk about how to make sure that for the 53% of people who have not built an e-commerce site before, how do we get the website built right the first time? You don't want to do this more than once. You want to get it right the first time. So how do you go about doing that, Melissa?
Well, the first thing I'm going to say is do it fast. I know this seems like an ironic thing to say, but e-commerce moves so quickly. So someone will say, build a website, and 2 years later they'll say, but it's out of date. And I'll be like, yeah, it's out of date because tech moves so fast. So that's the first thing you've got to think, is that tech does move so fast. So you have to think about being agile. You have to, I'm not going to use jargon, but you have to.
Agile's fine. I think we all understand it.
Okay, good. You have to think about being able to change things fast. So basically, when you build a website, just have the ability to scale, have the ability to change, so that when you do build it in order to grow. So don't build anything that is final. Don't think that you're building something final. Build it in order to grow.
Great. And I'm going to ask Billy the same question. Billy, do you have any thoughts on how to ensure a web build is done right the first time? Now we're in the bespoke setting. So you've got a blank canvas. You've got
Absolutely.
This mountain of VC money that's just arrived on your doorstep, and you've come to Billy to build this amazing website, but you've only got one crack at it. How do you build it right the first time?
So what we tend to do, once we've determined that, yes, we do need a custom build, and you'll have reasons for that, like I mentioned earlier, you'll have strategic reasons, you'll have technical reasons, but you've decided now you need a custom build. We go through a process of making sure, firstly, that we're building the right thing. So we spend time in workshops determining what is it that we need to build. How does it need to work? What are the outcomes that we need? What is the product at the end of the day? And there's different scales here. If it's just quite a robust e-commerce system that is custom, then that's quite a simple answer to that. But there might be intricacies in terms of plugging into other external systems, plugging into various things to add functionality. How are the users going to use that functionality? Then we make sure that we go through entirely to understand, and that's for us to understand the client, as well as the client to understand what they're going to get at the end of the day, and to make sure that we're agreed upon that. And so the rule of thumb is the more time you spend planning, the less muck-ups you have down the road. So that's why I agree with what Bjorn was saying, where after going through that workshopping process, after making these notes and deciding on what you want to build, you start to define it. And you define it using wireframes and UX type methodologies. But you also, and if you are going custom, let me say this one thing, that if you hear nothing else and you've come here and you're doing a custom build, make sure that whoever is servicing you does documentation. You need a specification document. You need a technical spec. You need a functional spec. Those are your blueprints. When you're building a house, you don't just start throwing some bricks down and off you go, because suddenly you're going to have a wall and you need a door there. The whole purpose of doing the documentation first is it's far easier to change a wireframe or a paragraph in a spec than it is to rebuild certain parts of your system, change the database, retest it. That becomes very costly. So we go through a process whereby after we've done the workshops, we define clearly what it is that needs building. And then from there, we choose the technologies that we need. So we don't go into this, similar to what Bjorn was saying earlier. We don't go into this going, okay, great, we're going to use microservices. And I'm going to use a few buzzwords here. No, we're going to use, this service with this cloud provider, and then let's hear what the solution is. We do it the other way around, where we go, okay, we need to build this that does all of these things. What is the best technology suited for that in terms of not just robustness of your solution, but in terms of scale and growth, in terms of security, and in terms of, operational support and all the other things that go around what you're building. So there's a lot that goes into it, but at the end of the day, if you have a solid process, if your developer has a solid process that you can depend on, and they've got a track record of successful products, then I think you can put confidence in them and just, trust them to take you on that journey and ask questions. Make sure you understand all the things. Don't just leave it and then check right at the end of the day. What have these guys built for you? Insist to check frequently on updates, on progress, on all of those things, and work as partners so that you see your end product being developed and have input and feedback.
You were touching on a topic that's close to my heart, which is total cost of ownership.
Yes.
And that is basically the idea that you mustn't just look at your dev build in isolation of just how much is it going to cost to build, but there are other factors that go in. Can you just give the entrepreneurs and the business owners in the webinar today a sense for what other costs come around a build of a
Absolutely.
platform?
I'd like to first illustrate something and then bring that point, if that's okay. So firstly, what I'd like to illustrate is, let's say you've got a very expensive car, but now you go take it to the cheap guy down the road that works out of his garage to take it for a service. And you wouldn't do that, right? And so you've got to contemplate total cost of ownership, because if you're building something that you put a lot of value in, a lot of development in, you don't put tons of money in one area and then cut corners at certain points. What's the point of having this really intricate, powerful website where if more than 200 people start hitting it, it falls over because you haven't provisioned enough server space? So those are the kinds of things you need to look at with total cost of ownership. You need all of your support mechanisms in place. So you need to, firstly, obviously, there's the development cost, like you said. There's the planning cost with UX and your workshops and all of those things. Then you've got what's actually probably more important than your development cost at times is your support cost. Because if you've got this idea that you build it once like a store and you walk away and you just leave it, you've probably got a wrong idea of an online business. And this is something that you keep working on, keep changing, keep updating, tweaking, and keep supporting, and you need to put that support cost in as well. So a couple of years down the line, so do a 3-year or 5-year total cost of ownership, include your support cost, include your hosting services. So if you're with a hosting company, so we're AWS partners. So what that means is most of our cloud services are based on AWS services. We put support packages in place. We do calculations based on what we estimate the various services will cost, at rest and under heavy load. Plan it and design it like it's Black Friday every day. One of my devs actually told me that. And I think that's a great rule of thumb. Build it as if you're super busy, and then you're going to have less problems. And then there's also licensing fees. So depending on what you're integrating or what you're using, you've got to identify if we're using something that connects with an external service that is going to need a license, factor those licensing fees in, there's a lot that you need. And the workshop is unearthing all of these costs so that you know exactly what you have before you jump in. Exactly.
Yeah, really, really important. And of course, AWS is Amazon Web Services, and every time you pay for that, you're putting Bezos into space. So take from that what you will. He said,
Well, he's
thank
only
you
been
to
into
all of
space
us.
once, but
Thank you to all of us for putting him into space. But we're going to now move on to Bjorn, who we've now got our website, and I think Melissa and Billy have really touched on this, that it's an ongoing journey, and we don't want to scare everyone off here. Look, websites can start small. You don't have to spend hundreds of thousands of rands, but you do need to know what you're getting into. But once it's built, how do we optimize the website? How do we continue to use things like analytics, big fancy word, monitoring our website and seeing where people click and what people do in order to transform that website into our top performing salesperson? That salesperson who's just going to sell your product day and night while you're sleeping. It's selling your products and services. Bjorn?
Yeah, so yeah, 100%. Once you've got the platform, once it's built and it's running, and you're at a point where you're quite happy with the product you got online, then you've got to start looking at your environment, your online footprint as a whole. You've got to start expanding and saying, okay, cool, we've got this beautiful little secluded place in the woods. How do we get people there? What signs do we put up to get them along this path into this nice little secluded place in the woods and make it popular? And that really starts to become a question of marketing. And UX is such an important part of marketing because, again, it's 90% of the time where a user's journey starts is that on some form of marketing output that you've strategized. You spend time with your marketing agency or internal marketing. I mean, if you're a small startup, you can engage directly with Facebook and put out your own ads and drive people towards your site. There's a lot of online resource into how to market effectively, but essentially what it comes down to is effective content. If the user, what is the first thing that the user experiences? Let's take the word for what it is, user experience. What is the first thing that a user experiences about your brand or product? 99% of the time, you've got one chance to impress someone online. You've got to understand it's a noisy environment. Online is a noisy environment, so you got to punch through that noise. So you got to make that one shot count. So coming back to something that Billy said, failing to plan is planning to fail. Plan your marketing. Plan what users are going to see and experience about your product at a very low barrier to entry. So while I'm scrolling through Instagram, if I'm using an image that's just kind of like meh, in the sea of everything beautiful on Instagram, I'm going to scroll past it. I'm not even going to, take account of your product. It could be the best thing since sliced bread, but if it's not enticing, if it's not punching through that noise, you're gone, and that was your chance gone. You might get one or two more chances, but if you haven't learned from the first mistake, you're just going to lose that person again. So content design becomes quite important. There was a question earlier here on the thread relating to what's more important, content or design. I would say, it's close on being one and the same. You design your content, and also define what is content. Content is the message that you're putting out there. Content is an image. Content is a video. And now the question becomes, has that image been designed, or is it, been a little mick and druk off of your phone? And there we go.
Great way of putting it.
Yeah. That's my product image. Or has it been given a bit of love? Has it been given a bit of design treatment? So I would say the question is more, have you designed your content, rather than which is more important, content or design? So design your content, put effort into, that salesman that you're talking about there, Richard. It's the difference between a salesman rocking up in a hoodie and jeans versus a salesman rocking up in, a nice tie and suit, and actually taking the effort to approach you with respect. And that's the thing, we've got to treat users with a bit of respect, understanding that they're seeing hundreds, if not thousands, of media inputs a day. How are we respecting them enough to say, okay, cool, here's something different that could actually be of interest to you? So I think it's very important to keep it user-centric when you design your content. There are a few other questions here. I don't know if I can go ahead and answer some of them.
We're gonna get to questions, Bjorn.
Okay, no worries.
In fact, we're getting quite a few from the audience, so thank you to everyone who's asking. I'm actually going to go back to Melissa now around a question that we've got from the audience. How do you build at a low price and yet allow for scale? I think you've got quite a good answer to this, but yeah, take it away. How do you build at a low price but still allow for that scaling later?
Well, first of all, my favorite thing is when I see website developers say, you can buy a website, we'll develop your website for 2,000 Rand. Because I always think those are the winners. Can you imagine that website that someone's designing for you for 2,000 Rand? So I think, first of all, you have to be rational when you start with a website and a website build. You have to think about what you're actually getting. And if someone's prepared to build you a website for 2,000 Rand, what you're getting. So start with some logic there, like what you're getting. But in terms of scalability, you have to think, okay, so let's say I don't have a huge budget. Let's start smaller. Say, okay, I'm going to start with 10 products and I'm going to start with a collection and I'm not going to start with as many filters. So think about it more simplistically. Keep your user journey tight. So when I say that, I mean, your user journey needs to be quick. People have no attention span. We're out of there fast. And when I say fast, I mean seconds. We're out of there within a couple of seconds if we don't like the user journey. So keep things so tight and clean and efficient. So get in there, get people to your products, get them checking out. Keep it small and tidy initially. And once you have lots of customers coming through your website, once you see how people are using your website, once you've finessed your audience, once you've actually got a profile and a demographic of who your audience is and how they traffic through the site, then you can start to grow it. Then you can say, okay, look at how people are searching. I need to add a more sophisticated search onto this. That's going to cost me some, it's going to cost me. Then, okay, now I can see people need filters. Oh, I can see that people need upsells. Oh, I can see they need combinations and combos and this. So as you build, you'll see what your customer needs. That's what we talk about scaling. Don't throw the kitchen sink at it to start. If you don't have the cash, if you don't know what your customers want. So start small, start with a very fast, quick purchase out of there. Get that person, start with your product, make it your hero, and then afterwards develop based on what your customer wants, what they are doing on your website.
Thanks, Melissa. I'm going to go to Billy now, and I actually want to discuss. There's a question from the audience where they've invested a lot in a build, but what happens if the website then isn't firing on all cylinders? Do you try to fix what you've got, or do you throw in the towel and start again? And how do you make that decision? Now, we don't have a lot of detail about what's going wrong with this website, but we know that the person has invested a lot and it's just not working. How do you make that decision to throw it all away and start again, or to try and fix it?
Okay, so normally we do a full audit to arrive at that, the answer to that question, because actually that's more of a common scenario than you'd realize. A lot of people come to us with something that they've invested a lot of money. And I can appreciate that. They've invested a lot of money in the solution and it's working for them, but it keeps falling over or there's something wrong with it. And so we normally start with an audit where we look at what they have and try and determine, based on the technology used, based on the load, based on what it's trying to do, we look at it and we go, okay, is it worth pouring into this and tweaking a few things so that we can get some wins? Or, as is often the case, sadly, is this so badly written that, you know, if I get my devs to add to this code, they're going to want to wear gloves while typing because they just don't want to touch the code.
Right.
And it's so bad that, you know, we need to move away. Then we need to do that. So what we sometimes do in that situation where you've got a bit of a lemon, let's say, is you need to go, okay, well, let this keep serving for now, and let's build something in the background. We will manage with what we have and do not spend a lot of time, spend less than 5 or 10% on just patching what we have, but focus most of the energy on the new build. Unfortunately, that is going to be another big investment. And the problem is a lot of people don't get out of that loop because they keep wanting to pour money into something that's not worth it. It's like standing in a queue. When you're standing in a queue and it's this long queue and you're the last in the queue, you'll leave. But if there's like now 7 people behind you, you're not going to leave, you're invested, right?
Yeah, that reminds me of the vaccine queues at Moore Park a couple of weeks ago.
100%.
Absolutely.
But that's exactly it. So this, I would say it's different in every situation, but be careful that you don't want to stay with what you're doing because you've invested so much, because it might lead you to a bad decision. You might be making an emotional decision and not a good business decision. But obviously you've got your own resources to consider when you do that.
Yeah, and I think you have to look at it philosophically. Sorry, anonymous attendee. You have to look at it philosophically and say, what can you learn from this build? You know, what can you draw from? So when we receive websites that we're taking over and that we may want to redevelop, there's still learnings, right? That can take place. That can take place with the current build. But take from it what you can. We've got another question, and I'm going to go to Bjorn here, because I think it's a UX question. What does it mean if visitors are spending lots of time on my website, but they're not buying? You know, they're sitting for 2 minutes on the homepage, but they're just not making that purchase. How can I change this?
I mean, it's a hard question to answer without actually, assessing the page in question. But it could be a multitude of factors. You know, it could be that the calls to action across the site are convoluted. You know, so the user journey and sitemap hasn't been thoroughly thought out. You know, so what you could find is people going down a path thinking they're going to reach destination A, and you take them to destination B, for argument's sake. I mean, that is one scenario. Another scenario could be literally what we're talking about here, an ineffective build. You know, there could be broken elements across the site, across the page, and people could be interacting with parts of the site that you're not even aware of that are broken. You know, so there could be an ineffective tech stack being used. And then again, you know, it could be down to design and actual visual appearance of the site that it's confusing. You know, it could be visually confusing. So there are a multitude of factors to ascertain how to or to figure that out a bit more clearly. You know, I would advise people to use. There's some tools you can use for free. There's one called Hotjar, HOTJAR, that you can install on your site, and you can actually see how people are tracking with their mouse across the site. That'll give you some insight and clues as to what could be going wrong on the site. The other side of it, you know, the other side of effective user experience is something you touched on earlier, Richard, which is your analytics and your tracking. To what depth are you monitoring your site? What are you doing to track your site? What are you doing to track how people are using your website? That data is so valuable to a business and to make those UX decisions. You know, that is always the first place that we look. Is we look at the data. We look to see what is the data telling us about these drop-offs. What is the data telling us about a high time on site but no sales? What is it telling us about a high bounce rate? You know, so people are coming in and leaving within 2-3 seconds. Melissa touched on that. You know, you got a very short amount of time to hook someone's attention. So there are a multitude of factors, but I would say a good guiding principle is the rule of threes. We use the rule of threes. So a good guiding principle would be ensure that your website loads within 3 seconds. You have to be fully loaded into the page within 3 seconds. And then further to that, you've got 3 seconds to make your content count. So that's kind of like a combo, you know, your 3 seconds to make your content count is wrapped up in the 3 seconds of your site loading. So you've got to make that content count. You've got to hook them within 3 seconds. You know, like Melissa was saying, online users are lazy. We're all lazy online. We don't like to think. We don't want questions. We just want answers. So give them the answers immediately. And then second to that, no more than 3 clicks to get to a conversion. What that means is I don't want to be clicking my mouse more than 3 times to get to a shopping cart. So if I see a product, I want to be able to possibly even add that to my cart from the homepage. At worst, I want to find out a bit more information about the product so I can click into the product and open it up and read a bit about it. And that's 2 clicks. The third click should be add to cart. You shouldn't be going any deeper than that to get a person to put the product in their cart, and then naturally they'll convert on that cart. Or, you know, we engage in an abandoned cart process to say, okay, cool, this guy has not done anything. There's products in his cart for the last half an hour. Let's trigger a message to the guy. So, but the rule of threes is a good one to go by.
That's a great framework.
Yeah. And then the other thing, very simple test that everyone can do is take your website or your product to a primary school student and take it to your grandfather. Take it to those 2 people. If those 2 people can get through your website without asking any questions to a point of conversion, you know, you're on the right track. If they're starting to ask questions and they're getting lost in that journey, if those 2 people are getting lost in that journey, you need to re-engineer and relook at your user
I'm a big fan of guerrilla UX testing, especially with your grandmother or somebody close to you. Just put them in front of the computer, put them in front of the website. Somebody's never used it before, and see if they can go through that process and they get excited to buy your product. So thanks Bjorn, thanks for that. So I'm going to go back to Melissa here. We've got a real challenge Angelica Hendricks is having. She's trying to increase her conversion rate and having implemented an abandonment cart emailer, so the email that goes off when the person doesn't complete the purchase, right? They've abandoned their cart. Day later, they get an email saying, hey, haven't you forgotten something? They click on the link, and she's implemented this abandoned cart email, which gives a voucher of 100 Rand. But they seem to be purchasing any items below 100 Rand, and she's not actually breaking even with the abandonment voucher. Take us through voucher selection or choice, or how you do vouchers generally, or coupon codes.
Well, the first thing I'm going to say there is that's a planning issue. You should not be giving anyone a discount that you cannot afford. So go back and think the logic through there. We need to fix that as a primary thing. But the abandoned cart sequencing is very smart. You know, that's how we do it. We start and you send, and we set these up with our standard notifications. Someone checks out. So there are sequences that you plan. And first of all, you can do a 1 hour, and then you can do a 10 hour, and then you do a 1 day, and then you do a 2 day, etc. And each have a sequence of initiation that creates more excitement. I don't recommend a 1 hour. Lots of people do, but I don't, because people who do a 1 hour, it's always because there was a reason why they abandoned. And my opinion is give them some amnesia. Forget the 1 hour, go for the 10 hour. 10 hour creates a little bit of amnesia. And you're like, oh, I can't remember. Oh yeah, it's lovely, great, check it out. So I start with the 10 hour, then I do a 1 day, then I go on to a little longer. And then after, when we're going into the couple of days, that's when you do the incentive and you offer a discount. And you only offer the discount afterwards. But then you get some people who are smart shoppers like me. Sometimes I wait for the incentive emails. Sometimes I wait for the sign up. You get a discount on your first sign up to our email address, and I use 3 different email addresses. So you've got to be careful with them while you're trying to do them. Also, yes, we are a very elementary, a basic e-commerce culture at the moment in South Africa, but you've got to also be careful about becoming a discount store. for. So
Yeah.
think about why you're doing all these incentives. So when you incentivize, I read a very interesting article the other day that said, do not incentivize for the first month. Don't do those incentives, because what they're creating is they're setting a precedent. What precedent do you want to set? And yes, of course, sometimes we get stuck in this absolute fear, nothing's selling. We have to just discount everything, because otherwise, we're not going to make a purchase, or we're not going to sell anything. But put it into your strategy. What Bjorn was saying earlier about why aren't people purchasing on the websites? They're coming on for 2 minutes, whatever. So sometimes, yes, it's totally a user experience issue, but sometimes it's also an audience issue. We haven't got the right audience coming yet. So we have to think about that as well. Make sure you're getting the right audience and the right user experience. Those two merge together to create sales.
Great. Billy, I'm coming to you quickly. Sandila is asking, is there some sort of regulatory authority that vets digital service providers? And if not, what credentials are essential when assessing capabilities of service providers?
Sure. That's actually a very good question. To my knowledge, there isn't. There isn't an institution that regulates in this industry, which is, I think, why we get such a diverse output, in terms of what people build.
That's a good way of
So
putting it.
I think the best thing to do is to look at a track record, look at references, and look at their processes. Typically, someone who's done this before will be able to spot things early, and they won't just agree to what you're saying. So, and if I can expand that a bit more, so you go to your new service provider and you say you want an e-commerce website. If they are quite dismissive and it's just yes, okay, cool, and you feel like you are in a queue at Macro, and there's no pushback or there's no interaction, that for me is a warning flag. You've got to have your service provider work with you almost as a partner and look at handling your unique requirements and considering the challenges that you have and putting themselves in your shoes. And then obviously, like I said, their track record is something. And then there's also, not many people have mentioned this, but there's the decision of, should I go with a company or should I go with a single independent freelancer? And the same thing holds true for that. If you've got a single individual freelancer who has a great track record and they're very impressive, you probably get a good deal with them. But you must remember that you lack a couple of the securities that a company will give you, that you pay for, but they give you a more holistic view on something, because they've got different people and different roles and processes defined. Whereas a freelancer will have, there will be typically one person doing everything, and that has its drawbacks as well. So there's a lot of trade-offs, and you've just got to be wise. It's not a mystical business, it's a business. So if you approach it with a business mentality where you just ensure that every step along the way, you are understanding what you're spending money on and you're getting value for that money, I think that'll serve you well.
And that's where we're going to wrap it up. Thanks, Billy. Thanks for that. So thank you to our panelists, Bjorn Byrne, Melissa Ralston, and Billy Akecomer. Thank you so much to Online X for giving this platform. Who would have thought we would have been talking about this amazing topic as developers? And thank you to our partners, Sasfin, Payfast, and UAfrica. And of course, thank you to the audience. This is part 2 of a 6-part series, and we look forward to having you for the full duration of the bootcamp, learning how to take your e-commerce business online.